My name is Jonas Keeler, and I'm a senior in high school. I typically like writing shorter things like short stories or like situations or scenarios, like snapshots, no more than like a page or two. I typically like writing in pencil rather than typing. I like kind of doing experimental things. I kind of like putting my head in like a weird space that I typically don't go in, like different ideas, just odd things that you don't really think about writing about, like writing in the second person. Or I recently just wrote a little situation about a creature that you can't describe, and that was kind of fun to do. So I'm currently in the midst of, or in the beginning stages of writing a 5-act play. It's kind of like the first time I've ever tried doing something like that, but one of my teachers told me I was really good at doing dialogue. I'm really interested in Shakespeare, so I kind of wanted to emulate his style and write something a little bit bigger than I'm used to. Because I like Shakespeare, I wanted to do a 5-act play, but I kind of wanted to invert a lot of the things that are normal to Shakespearean plays. A lot of the Shakespearean tropes, I kind of wanted to turn those on their head. It's going to be mainly about 2 characters, which is different from most Shakespeare plays, which are focused on a cast of characters. And it's going to be mostly a comic tragedy, which he usually does comedy or tragedy. I mean, The Tempest was kind of a comic tragedy, but the Fool character, usually you end up liking the Fool, and he's like this silly guy, but in this one he's just like a mean dude who's kind of like the antagonist. So it's about 2 brothers who try to restore glory to their household, which their father kind of left in shambles when he died, and they go on an adventure, and they're really good friends, but then slowly over time they start kind of hating each other, and well, ends up with both of them dying. So, and the title I'm thinking is called Cleft, but that is not faux show yet. Right now I've only written I've written the descriptions of the characters, the plot summary. I've written a few scenes. I've written like a little preempt prologue that the Fool says, and I left off right in the middle of a scene, so I'm just going to start writing there. And you know what? I left off on purpose there because I was going to have to write a song, and I'm not that great at that, so I wanted to kind of pause that and come back to that later. And I'm not sure it would be the best to come back to that now just because I haven't really thought about it very much. So instead I'm just going to move on to the next scene. Right now I'm just looking back to make sure I am doing what I want to do in the summary. Yeah, okay. So in this scene I'm still like in the first act where it's very expository, and I'm introducing one of the main characters whose name is Nilius, and Nilius is of a different house than the main characters are. You're supposed to start off not liking him. He's supposed to be kind of like a uptight, rather prudish, noble, and throughout the play you're supposed to start liking him more and more as you kind of start seeing the fractures between the 2 brothers who are the main characters grow, and by the end you kind of dislike the people you liked at the beginning and you like who you didn't like at the beginning. So I'm trying to write him as just being kind of like a jerk to like all the common folk, and that's kind of hard. But yeah. So this is like my first draft, so a lot of it is just getting the words down and the ideas, the kind of basic structure. It might not be good on the first draft, so definitely gonna have to come back to it later and revise a lot, but right now it's just about getting down the core concepts. Like at the point I am at right now, I want the focus of the scene, the character Nilius. I want him to have a monologue or a soliloquy, but I'm not sure what I really want that to be about right now. I wanted to make him out to be kind of a very vain person, though. So I'm just going to put vain monologue, or it's a soliloquy. He's alone. And then I'm going to move on to the next part of the scene where the brothers their sister arrives, and she's kind of like running the household right now, and Nilius is trying to court her. So one of the problems I've been finding in writing something emulating Shakespeare is that you have to emulate his language as well, and you know, that's kind of a hard thing to do unless you're very, very familiar. So recently I've been reading a lot of his works. I mean, I've seen a lot of the plays already, but I didn't actually analyze the text. So that's something I've been doing, trying to prepare myself better to do this, because that's one of the biggest problems I've been having is I feel like the language I'm using is not time appropriate or era appropriate. So with Nilius' character, one thing I'm trying to do is, because he's kind of like an outcast in the rest of the play, because he's like the only member of the cast who's not part of the house, I'm trying to kind of differentiate him both in terms of, like, when I imagine him, I think of him as just being dressed very darkly, whereas everyone else is dressed very brightly in like green and white. But another thing I'm trying to do is I want him to be really smart and like obviously having a good head on his shoulders, but I want him to be really bad with words, and I want characters to constantly like kind of mock him because he's hated in the house. Everyone dislikes him, but I want him to be constantly mocked for his screwing up of language. So that's one of the things I'm doing right now. So this all started as like a kind of just the basic idea was I wanted to try and make a Shakespearean drama with only 2 characters in it, just in total. But as I continued writing it and thinking up ideas, I figured that that'd be just really hard and probably really short. You couldn't really do a 5-act play with only 2 characters. Well, I mean, you probably could, but I can't. So I added a whole kind of subplot, which is the one I'm focusing on right now, which includes like the back home, basically, because the 2 brothers, they go and adventure off and to a different land. So they're going to be kind of like one plot strand, and then back home at the manor is going to be the other kind of plot that's occurring, which involves Nilius and basically the house staff and their sister Iona. So I just started writing the script with 2 unnamed characters who weren't originally brothers, but in one of the lines I was like, "You're my bonded brother," so I was like, hey, they're brothers now, cool. And I don't know, kind of that's was the main thing. Like, I felt really good about that one scene that I wrote, so I kind of refer back to that a lot when I'm thinking of how I want these character lines to go, how I want them, because I'm about to introduce these 2 characters to the scene, and I want that their interaction, the 2 brothers, is very important. I want them to seem very close and bonded, and at the beginning, because I am at the beginning, and then over time I want that to fracture and become cleft. But so I'm referring back to that just so I can introduce it in this scene.